if I can, as the chair of our branch committee, if I can just say welcome everybody here. It's an absolute delight to see so many people, again, from across the county and across the area as well. And of course, a welcome to Dr. Katherine Deane. So delighted to see you, Katherine. We haven't met, but I'm looking forward to hearing what you say. And I'll immediately hand over to Ruth Herman, who is going to carry on with the introductions and take it on from there. Ruth, over to you.
Well, Katherine, I've heard Katherine before because she gave a marvellous talk to our research group in Cambridge. Well, it's not the Cambridge Research Group, but it's centred in Cambridge. And I thought that she would be able to talk to people about anxiety and depression because it's a really big subject. And it's your specialist, isn't it? So I really can't do any more than just say that Katherine's a real expert on this, and we're very lucky to have her. And over to you.
Right. Just interrupt before you start, Katherine. Can I just invite everybody to mute themselves, so that then there'll be no come back on voices, etc. And then if you do want to come in with anything, obviously you can carry on to Katherine.
Yeah.
Thank you, Katherine. Over to you.
We'll do questions at the end because we're recording this so that you get a really good run through. And let's see if I can share my screen and get this all up and running happily. That one. Yeah. There we go.
There we go.
Excellent.
Lovely. Marvellous.
Start from the start. There we go. So, as we said, we're going to talk about Parkinson's and anxiety today. Let me introduce myself. I'm Katherine. I'm a biologist by training, so all the advice I give today is with that very strong caveat of I'm not a clinician, but I will give you my best answers and tell you what we can. I have a functional movement disorder, which has some aspects that are similar to Parkinson's. I have slow walking, I do shake, I get fatigue and brain fog, hence I'm talking to you today from my bed because that's a way of me helping manage my fatigue. Sometimes I've struggled myself with anxiety and depression. But mine, unlike yours, where we can actually see the damage in the brain as the disease progresses, with mine you can't see anything. My MRIs, etc., are all normal. It's a software fault. The signalling has gone astray. I've had it for 22 years. I've been in a wheelchair for the last 10 or so. We know that psychosocial aspects of Parkinson's are really there right from the day one, that being diagnosed with Parkinson's can be frightening, lonely, and isolating. And when I was doing research, I thought it was really important that we started to ask patients what their priorities were about what we should do in research. So back in 2014, I worked with Parkinson's UK and the James Lind Alliance to ask what's the top 10 research priorities. Cure for Parkinson's was obviously the implicit very top priority, but it was sort of, can we have the top 10 for the management while we're waiting on the cure to be found? And we asked over 1,000 patients, carers and clinicians. It was a two-stage survey. The first stage was, what do you want researching? And then we gave that huge long list to everybody and said, of those, what would be your top 10? And then we had a final meeting to agree the top 10. And anxiety and stress came out as the second highest priority. And we thought, well, that's a big issue, you know, and it was really clear. So what's anxiety? Anxiety is this feeling of unease, worry, fear. Your heart races, you feel sweaty, shaky, short of breath. And everybody feels anxious from time to time, but it usually passes once the situation's over. But if it persists, then we start to get worried about it and we start to say, we should be doing something about this psychologically. It can change behavior. You can start being overly careful or avoiding the things that trigger your anxiety. And sometimes your worries can be out of proportion to relatively harmless situations. And it's when it interferes with everyday lives and relationships that we start to go, we really should be doing something about this. Now, we know that it affects about a third of people with Parkinson's. It often happens with depression, and it has a large impact on the quality of life. Sometimes we find that anxiety shifts with your on and off state. So as you go on, you may feel better. And as you head off your meds, sometimes the anxiety kicks in at that point. But what we found when we looked was that 30% of the anxiety looked at when they were doing epidemiological studies in research was classified as not otherwise specified, which is a we don't know bucket, which I didn't think was a particularly helpful thing, considering that's a third of patients basically in the we're not really quite sure what sort of anxiety you've got bucket. And we thought maybe we should describe anxiety in Parkinson's a bit better so that we have a better classification, a better way of treating it. We also found that there was very, very little treatments being offered for people with Parkinson's and anxiety. There are still no definitive trials of any treatments, so no fully powered, large numbers, well-designed, randomized controlled trials of any treatments for anxiety. We have anxiolytics, so drugs that have some limited evidence, and it may be that just as with depression, Parkinson's medications themselves may have a positive impact. And we're not quite sure how they work. It might be they make you feel better because your symptoms are controlled better, and that's a perfectly valid way, but it might be a slightly more direct way because we know Parkinson's has this interesting interaction with mood, so anxiety and depression. So it might be that it's having that effect. We do know that cognitive behavioral therapy can be helpful, but we don't have definitive evidence of how you would deliver it and whether or not, and how large a benefit we would expect to see. But there's also other psychological models that may be relevant and may be working in, for example, acceptance and commitment therapy, ACT. So there's a lot of maybes out there. There's a lot of pilot data of studies that are very small, got 30 people in them, that sort of thing, but nothing that's definitive saying absolutely this will usually work for somebody with Parkinson's. So I got the very wonderful Daniel Cohen, who was doing his clinical psychology doctorate. And that's where he's doing a professional doctorate, so he gets loads of clinical training to become a professional clinical psychologist, but he also has to do a small research project at doctoral level. And we also had the most amazing two lay advisors on our steering group, Bob Chalmers and Jackie Mallion, who have both got Parkinson's and have struggled with anxiety at various times during their disease course. So we did a couple of surveys. The first survey was brainstorming. Tell us about your anxiety. Give us all the information you can about what triggers it, what thoughts you have when you're having it, what behaviors you do, how it feels, the emotions you have. And amazingly, 205 people with Parkinson's responded to this and gave us such rich data. It was brilliant. So we got this sort of response because it affects my breathing. I tend to avoid going out to meet people and avoid social situations. I start thinking if people are looking at me, then it makes my symptoms worse, i.e. dyskinesia. When it kicks in, it increases. The anxiety will last until I take myself out of that situation. It has a big effect. I try not to think about it, but I've been known to fake feeling ill and not go out. I hate the thought that people may look at me. And as researchers, we look at that and go, wow, brilliant data. Sucks. We acknowledge that this is not a fun thing to be having. This is obviously somebody who's really struggling. But we then go, whoa, we've got so many categories here. We've got so many different bits that we can put them in. So we would cut that up into sections and go, right, it affects my breathing. Right, we'll put that in a fight or flight box. We'll put, it makes my symptoms worse. We'll put that in the increases Parkinson's boxes. I've been known to fake feeling ill. We'll put that in the avoid social situations box. So we ended up with lots of boxes with lots of pieces of paper in them, literally, from everybody that have responded, having a look at what everybody said. And then we would go through them and really make sure that we had absolutely said everything that everybody had said. We covered absolutely everything. So when we were looking at everything that we'd put in the toileting box, we decided there were two key statements there. One, I worry about the embarrassment of having a toileting accident, being incontinent. And the other one was, I'm embarrassed by the frequency and urgency with which I need to urinate. And this is where our lay advisors were absolute godsends, because they really helped us make sure we had missed absolutely nothing and that everything that we said was really clear, really unique, really simple to understand. So they were brilliant. So then we put all those 137 statements together and we said to people, rank them. Rate the statements on how much to you typically experience it, or never, all the way through to almost always. And then maybe some of the statements were more about your experience of the impact of the anxiety, and then it was sort of, is this your experience? Is this your impact? Strongly disagree all the way through to strongly agree. And we had 341 people with Parkinson's fill in these ones. Now, that was really amazing, because on top of the 137 statements, we also had the usual demographics, what's your age, how long have you had Parkinson's, a few standardized scales and things. It was over 200 questions here, and 341 people were diligent enough and wonderful enough to go through and give us all this data. It was amazing. And so we identified that of those 137 statements, actually quite a lot really had significant impact or frequency on people. So 102 of them really were, these are common things to happen, these are having high impact. So let's go through and see what those are. The first thing is that this is the largest survey in the world. We had a total of 394 people involved, and that is amazing. And it is like tenfold bigger than any other survey done on Parkinson's anxiety ever. So that is completely brilliant. And the other thing is about 3/4 of anxiety experiences are directly related to or exacerbated by the Parkinson's. And we'll talk through this. So you have things like that are very general, that anybody with anxiety in the world would say, I try to distract myself from the anxiety, something like that. Anybody with anxiety, Parkinson's or no, would be saying something like that. But other things were really directly linked to Parkinson's. I worry when I see other people at later stages of Parkinson's, or they were exacerbated by the Parkinson's. If people are too close, I feel my movements are restricted. And that's where people are worried about falling over, being pushed and not being steady enough, or even just freezing and that sort of thing. So it's kind of, oh, this is much more complex than the literature, than the research, than the clinicians currently understand it. Now, the really cool thing, and I'm not downplaying how sucky anxiety is. I've been there, I've done that, I've definitely got the t-shirt. It sucks to have this. But the cool thing is that anxiety feels like anxiety in Parkinson's. And why that's cool is we've got a lot of therapies that can work with these feelings. And this feels, so anxiety feels like anxiety, which is brilliant. There isn't a totally unique and we've never seen before sort of anxiety. It's fairly bog standard, which is great because it means we can do something about this. So feeling overwhelmed, dread, nervous, panicked, frightened, upset, irritated, angry, all of these are emotions that we recognize as being very common to anxiety. But the physical symptoms were interesting because we looked at them and said, now if you didn't know somebody had anxiety, would you say somebody had Parkinson's here? Because a lot of these are flip over symptoms, that they could be either the anxiety or the Parkinson's, and probably in a large part are ones that aggravate each other. So I get more tired, I get more worried, I get more worried, I get more tired. You can see nasty catch-22s going on. So things like fatigue, changes in body temperature, increased sweating, increased heart rate, muscle tension, stomach discomfort, needing to use the toilet, restlessness. A lot of those you're looking at and going, actually, those are very Parky type symptoms as much as they're anxiety type symptoms. We had 14 statements about behaviors. And again, these were often impacted by Parkinson's symptoms. So safety seeking. I plan things out in great detail, how to get out of a location quickly. I prefer to be accompanied by someone familiar when I'm going into a new situation. Or avoidance behaviors. I avoid busy, crowded places. I avoid decision-making or positions of responsibility. I select food and drink that's easier to manage. And we had lots of thoughts and triggers. These were our two big categories. Again, often linked to Parkinson's, and they had overall big themes. Again, very common within anxiety, but having that Parkinson's overlay was so important for us to understand really well. So you had things like meta worry, worrying about worrying. I worry about feeling anxious, how long it will last for. Will it impact on my health? How will I cope with it? all these horrid thoughts going through our heads. I worry about upsetting those close to me, making things difficult for them. Then the catastrophization. I blow things out of proportion. I make mountains out of molehills. Then there's negative comparisons to past abilities and others' abilities. When I'm not able to perform a task or role I previously would have been able to. And I compare my health status to those who are in better health. Boy, do I know those particular gremlins. They're pests. Fear of social judgment. So I worry how others will perceive my Parkinson's symptoms. They'll judge me negatively. I worry about the embarrassment of having a toileting accident. When I'm in social situations, I worry about being evaluated by others. And there's fear of failure. I worry I'll lose control and not be able to do my everyday tasks. That when I'm triggered to have anxiety when I don't meet the demands or expectations. But also we had one gentleman say this in the first survey, but it was strongly supported in the second survey, that actually anxiety is a proportionate and rational response to the difficulties I experience with Parkinson's. In other words, let's not put a clinical label on all of this. Some of this is, yeah, you've got a tough disease to manage and it's a bit of an embuggerance at times. And yes, it's perfectly reasonable to be a bit anxious at times. What we're looking at is when that anxiety becomes problematic and when we need to step in clinician terms and actually help out. But we really did find that the triggers had a bi-directional relationship between anxiety and the Parkinson's symptoms. So when I have trouble with movement or coordination, tremor, I'm tired, difficulties with sexual performance, all of those were, if that happens, then the anxiety gets worse, the anxiety gets worse, then that gets worse. So again, it's this downward spiral that's really nasty. And then we had 11 statements around impact, and we could see how much impact this anxiety aspect of Parkinson's was having on people's lives, and therefore how important it is for us to really start developing therapies that can genuinely help someone with Parkinson's and anxiety, because it's impacting on freedom and independence. It's making the Parkinson's symptoms worse. It's impacting sleep, relationships, making me more isolated. It's harder to complete daily tasks, to think clearly, to have confidence, to express myself, to work, and be an effective parent or carer for those who need my support. So we really can see this is an important area for us to work on. Now, we, in the survey, identify the commonly experienced symptoms, but what we really want to emphasize is every person's anxiety experience is unique to them. But anxiety feels like anxiety, which is, like I say, actually, that's a really positive thing. It's got lots of things in common with generic anxiety, and that gives us treatment options. But we now know that if you're going to deliver therapy for Parkinson's anxiety, you need to know about Parkinson's. Otherwise, it's just not going to be relevant. You're not going to click into what your patient is working with and what they're struggling with. Now, there is a little model out there by Egan and friends about cognitive behavioral therapy model of anxiety and depression in Parkinson's. Now, he created it completely theoretically. He had no data. We added in a little data. Don't worry about the detail of this, but basically we're sort of going, yeah, actually, we like their model. This CBT model seems to be reasonable and helpful. And what we've gone in and gone is, yes, we can reinforce all of these things that they said we think that there's going on. And we've added just a little more data. So some things they thought were only going to be triggering depression, we're going, oh no, they trigger anxiety as well. And we also added in a few things like increased Parkinson's symptoms wasn't in Egan's model already. And we're going, actually, the anxiety, it's problematic in that way. But also we've got other people like Moss Morris, who has a unified theory for anxiety in long-term conditions. And again, this is really useful because you're not too unique. And actually, in the context of medicine, you never want to be completely unique. You want to be general, you want to be boring, you want to be run of the mill, because then we've got therapies that we can help you with. And in her theories, she's talking about the general managing with a long-term condition. So things like adjustment to diagnosis. Yep, we had statements like it's worse in the period just after my diagnosis. Worrying about coping with progression. I worry about the rate at which my symptoms progress and how I will cope. Coping at their worst. Worrying about how family and friends will cope. We've got statements about becoming a burden or when loved ones get upset, and about the impact of anxiety behaviors on family and friends. That being accompanied by someone familiar to going into a new place or situation, it's an understandable thing, but sometimes that can be a burden to the family or friends that are going with you. So, like I say, anxiety feels the same for everyone. It has a very negative impact, and in long-term conditions, there's common issues. So that's really brilliant. We've got that anxiety in Parkinson's is really strongly interlinked with the Parkinson's symptoms, and that in a clinical setting, that means that both you and the clinicians could get confused as to whether this symptom is a Parkinson's symptom or an anxiety symptom. And that's actually quite important when we're looking at how we address that therapeutically. We also know it's caused by an aggravation of symptoms, and I'll talk about medication adherence and optimization in a minute about that. And we also know it can be directly caused by the Parkinson's or in response to the Parkinson's. So this makes total sense. You know, you go look at that and go, yeah, no shit, Sherlock. But this wasn't in the literature. This wasn't described in the detail that we've got. One of the areas that I'm also interested in is around medication adherence. And we know that if you can manage to get on top of keeping on top of your pills, that can have a really good impact on quality of life and symptom control, and that it is incredibly complex in Parkinson's, and that you need to have support to be skilled up enough to manage to stay on top of your pills. We do wonder about whether or not anxiety is also affected by the increase in symptoms that you get if you're not managing to stay on top of the pills. Because we know that even a single missed dose can sometimes impact on the whole day's ability to get on with doing things. And whilst you've got, you know, pill boxes and timers and pre-packaged prescriptions, and even if you're lucky, some adherence therapy, it's complex. It's difficult to do it well. So we're kind of looking at it and going, well, obviously the psychological therapies and maybe even the anxiolytic drugs might be helpful in Parkinson's and anxiety, but actually just something as simple as helping you guys stick to your medication regimes may well be also really helpful for managing anxiety. And we also acknowledge that family and friends are absolutely critical at helping all of us manage our disabilities on a day-to-day basis. And that if they have improved knowledge, coping techniques, can assist with adherence or positive support, then that can be really important. So, next steps in research. We are literally in the depths of analysing this in greater detail. Like I say, amazing amount of data that people with Parkinson's gave us, and it meant that we've got a really rich database which we are gradually working our way through to understand. So we're looking at, does the anxiety differ? Does the characteristics of it differ if you have tremor dominant versus rigidity dominant? We don't know, nobody else does. Let's go and have a look. We've definitely done this. We've created a measure that describes Parkinson's anxiety. So it's about 50 items long, so it's quite a long one, but it's a descriptive measure. So that would help tell a clinician, this is what my anxiety looks like. And we're hoping to also create a short form of it, so probably only about 10 items long, that will be maybe more useful in day-to-day practice. Eventually, we want to co-create therapies for people with Parkinson's who have got anxiety, with or without their family and carers, to really make sure that we can really help that in a targeted way, in a way that makes sense for people with Parkinson's and really has impact. And we would eventually be doing randomized controlled trials to evaluate how effective, safe, and acceptable these therapies were. Huge, huge thanks to all the people with Parkinson's and their carers for their insights. I mean, to have that many people complete the survey, like I say, it is the largest in the world. It is quite amazing to have that amount of data. It makes the research so much more robust, and that we can come and talk to people and go, yep, we're pretty sure about this. Let's move on to the next steps. Let's start to get some therapies together. We would like to thank all the medics and therapists who shared their expertise, and Parkinson's UK were amazing in promoting this and getting it out and about. That's my email. The team that we worked with was Dr. Kat Ford. She's also a clinical psychologist. Dr. Daniel Coven, I'm very glad to say he's now passed and is now officially a clinical psychologist. Bob Chalmers and Jackie Mallion, like I say, are wonderful lay advisors. And Mrs. Charlotte Irving Cohen is Daniel's wife, and she's following up a year behind him in her ClinSci-D training, and she's still training at the moment, but she's the one putting together the scale and the comparisons and things, and we're getting there. So there's the references. Should you need copies, do let me know. I'm very happy to share copies of these.
They'll be on the so share copies,
yes,
right?
That's
sorry.
it.
Yeah.
And because I know that you guys are always involved in so many other things, often as not, I've got a little bit of information there. So the embed stuff is about how to reopen after COVID lockdowns in a way that is both safe but also accessible for people with disabilities, because that interaction is fairly complex. And then finally, there is a little survey, should you wish to start and play. It's just been uploaded onto the Parkinson's UK's research database. There's a short link to it if you wish to, and it's talking about depression and adherence, medication adherence. And if you'd like to take part in that, oh, it would be wonderful to have your opinions. So I think that's it. Yes, I will stop sharing now.
Right. We ask some
questions.
Thank you so much. So now we'll have to ask some questions. Thank you very much, Catherine. That was really good, lovely and clear. So who wants to ask the first question? Anyone?
And you can put it in chat if that's easier for you.
If you want to. Ooh. They're stunned by the brilliance of your talk. They are going, oh, we can't cope, it's so clever. Come on, someone, be bold.
I promise.
I'll open the back.
Hi, I'm Roy Mead from.
When you talk about the. Sorry, I've overspoken somebody else. Am I?
No, carry on.
I was going to say, Catherine. I was going to say, when you talk about the number of people involved, over what area you're talking about? The UK? You're talking about
that was the UK. That was the UK.
The whole of the UK, was it?
Yes, mostly England. It always is. But we did advertise it via the Parkinson's UK Research Network. That was our major route of advertising. We did do a little more advertising for the second one via the groups directly and things like that, but it was mostly through Parkinson's UK's research interest group.
All right. Okay. Thank you.
There's some Claire Unwins that say, can members join your randomized study, Catherine?
We haven't got it going yet. We've got to get the funding for it and everything else. I promise I will come back to you. If I get the funding for that and organised, it will take us a little while to get organised. And to be honest, I think we want to be well clear of COVID before we try doing anything like that as well. Okay. But I promise, as and when the wheels of research run very, very slowly, I do apologise, but in a few years' time, I will probably do that. We've got to validate that scale. That's my next job. And then we will start looking at how we co-create some solutions to this anxiety.
And anyone else? That's great. Thank you.
Hi, Catherine. Yep. Janet here from the steering group. Hi, nice to see you. I would have symptoms of anxiety. And for ages and ages, I didn't know that they were anxiety, until I'd call out 111 because I was feeling so absolutely awful, and they'd all say it was anxiety. And it seems that my anxiety just affects my body rather than my head, or else I'm in denial. Have you anything to say on that?
No, completely. And as you saw, we had so many people saying, I've got symptoms, and they're very physical symptoms. And it doesn't mean that you're necessarily got what I call hamster run thoughts going around in my head. That's what I get, is, oh, worry. But you don't even need that. It can be that your body is reacting to the anxiety, and you've got physical tension going on, and then you've got all of those symptoms that we saw going on. So your rigidity increases, you feel terrible, your heart is racing, all of those things. It isn't anything to do with denial. It's just how your system is reacting to the anxiety in combination with your Parkinson's. And I think that's where we really sort of unpicked it and said, that's what we really need to understand better. And yeah, hopefully we will start to get some symptoms so you guys can feel a bit better.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Oh, probably, yeah.
I think the gentleman called Sheila would like to come in next.
Hi, I'm actually Roy. Sheila's with me.
Right.
Thank you for a very interesting presentation. Just looking forward on the co-creating the therapies. From what you're saying, and I have known real knowledge of this, there are therapies known for what you'd defined as the common. What are the therapies that are for Parkinson's sufferers? Is there something specifically different, or is it already known what they are?
Yeah, that's what we would like to investigate, because what we've got at the moment is we've got evidence generally for general cognitive behavioral therapy, and then it's been applied in the context of people with Parkinson's. What they haven't done is tweak it so that it's more relevant for people with Parkinson's. Now, like I say, I've struggled with anxiety gremlins myself. I've done some basic CBT with the NHS, and one of the frustrations I had was they didn't get my movement disorder, and so a lot of what they were saying didn't feel relevant to me, didn't feel particularly useful to me, and so I didn't particularly gain huge benefit from that. I'm managing the anxiety in my own unique ways, but I'm not sure that I'm not sure I couldn't have gotten more had it been somebody who had a bit more of an idea of how somebody with a long-term condition manages, how somebody with a movement disorder manages, and like I say, in the context of Parkinson's, having identified that the symptoms and signs of Parkinson's are so integrate, mixed in with the anxiety, we're kind of going, yeah, the generic therapies probably do have some of the solutions. We just don't think they possibly have the best solutions. And I'd like to find the best solutions for you guys. Hope that makes sense.
Yes, thank you.
Julie's got her finger up.
Thank you. Yeah, that was a good, interesting talk. Before I was diagnosed with Parkinson's, a few years before, I was diagnosed with hyperventilation syndrome. I had a lot of physical problems with anxiety, but I thought that I had pins and needles. I thought I was going to die at times. It was awful. And it turned out, I don't know what, I'm sure you've heard of it, hyperventilation syndrome. It's when you overbreathe.
Yeah.
And mine was through anxiety. So I was retaught by a specialist physio to breathing techniques to try and breathe through. So do you do things like that? Do you do physical techniques of?
You see, that's exactly the sort of thing that I'd like to look at when we're starting to look at how do we design a therapy that's really relevant for people with Parkinson's. Because I completely agree with you, Julie. I strongly suspect that breathing techniques are likely to be a really positive thing because they're very physical. It's very grounding when you can do that well, isn't it?
And you've always got your breath with you. That's what they say. You've always got your breath with you. Because I'd never heard of it before. And I was really struggling, struggling. I saw an interview in a magazine, Good Housekeeping magazine, actually, about it. And I thought, well, that's me. And I'd always been an anxious person. This was a few years before I was diagnosed. And now, obviously, with Parkinson's, that cycle can start again quite easily.
And one of the things that we find is quite often is that mood disorders, so the depression and the anxiety, precede the diagnosis of the Parkinson's. So we know that they're in similar areas in the brain, they're interacting with each other. So yeah, it is us looking at how can we design this best to really work for someone with Parkinson's? Because we, like I say, the good thing is some of this is really general. And that's brilliant because we can go in and go, yeah, probably CBT would be helpful straight away. But if we can refine that a bit and take in expertise like yours, Julie, that says, oh, actually, the breathing techniques were really important. We can go, oh, we could try that out and let's see what we can do.
Which if I may say, to begin with, they may feel really ill. I actually felt worse to begin with because I felt like I was starving myself of oxygen. But once I got into it, relaxation and things as well.
And that's exactly the sort of thing you need to know, is to warn people. It might feel worse to start with, or you might get these sorts of side effects, or it might not, you know, it might make you feel a bit more, even more aware of people looking at you in the initially, so that it's not just to go in and say, oh, it's all going to be sunshine and flowers and rainbows and lovely. It's going to be tough work, but once you get through these bits, sometimes, you know, this should work for you. And it's knowing the iffy bits as well as the good bits, so that, you know, we really understand it properly. No, thank you, Julie. That's incredibly helpful.
I believe that Janet Roberts, alias Aubrey.
Yes, I'm Janet's husband, and I was very surprised to discover how much you know about my wife. The second statement would be, have you published this? Because I'd like to pass it to our GP surgery.
I am literally in the process of, I've just got to tidy it up again a little bit more, so it's in the correct formats and everything else. For movement disorders, we've submitted it. We have submitted, like I say, I've got to tidy it up a little bit for them. That's my job tomorrow, literally. So my job tomorrow is to tidy it up for them so we can get it to peer review. So probably in a few months' time, fingers crossed, it will be coming out. But yes, we are intending to fully publish this in a peer reviewed journal, and at the same time as we publish that, we will be releasing a nice summary of it in Parkinson's UK as well, in their newsletters and everything else, because we're so indebted to Parkinson's UK and to all of the members for their contributions to the study. It's obviously important that we also create a more user-friendly version of it for you guys as well. Does that help?
Thank you.
Who else? Next, anybody else?
I can see a couple of hands up. I can see a Rose D'Souza.
Oh, Rose, okay. You're muted, Rose.
Hello.
No, you're not.
Yes. Hello. Yes, thank you for an excellent presentation. And we'd just like to ask, did hallucinations as a cause of worry come up in your research?
Yes, I believe it did. It wasn't that common though. I think that came in as one of the less common ones. I think it's one of those ones of, if you've got it, perfectly reasonable that sometimes those hallucinations will cause worry. Not all, thankfully, but some will. It's just that not huge numbers of people have the hallucinations to start with. So again, we're doing the general stuff, but as and when we got to co-creating a therapy, things like specific side effects of medications like hallucinations would be part of that information pack we'd like to give the therapist, to really make sure that if they've got somebody who's struggling a bit with the hallucinations, they specifically ask and say, do those make you anxious? Are those worrying hallucinations? So they can actually interact with that specifically and help along with that. Does that make sense?
Yes, it does. Thank you.
No
problem. Can I have a follow-up question?
Jeff wanted to put his hand up. Sorry, Sue. Sorry, Rose.
Sorry, I was just going to sneak another one in. So the next stage of your research is to try and put together the solutions. And do you know when is that estimated to be completed? And can you come back and tell us about it, please?
Oh, I will definitely come back and tell you about it, because I will definitely be needing your help with it. It won't be this year. I have to admit that I've had the joys of discovering the effects of post-viral fatigue. Not COVID, thank God, but I've had 14 months of really, really struggling with my energy levels. So in a pragmatic way, I'm sort of doing next year, I'm taking one student, not half a dozen of them, which is not uncommon as I would. So but I promise we will get to it. It's just, I've had to slightly put the brakes on to be able to manage my health, which is a total bugger, by the way. I really get annoyed when this happens and I can't do all the things that I really want to do, but I promise I will get there. But what we will have done by then is have a really good idea of the measures and things like that. And just having a decent measure, believe me, that makes such a difference. So having a decent measure is our first point. But then I will have had a bit more time to think about how do we really consult well to co-create that design of a therapy. And that will be when I come back to you guys and go, I need lots of information. and lots of ideas.
I think
because I want to
Jeff,
develop you guys.
Jeff, I
Jeff is
think
trying
Jeff
to
has
get
been
it.
waiting patiently.
I think Jeff is trying to get it.
Hello. I have a speech problem.
No voice.
Your talk was really marvellous. I hope I can get a copy of it. I find that I don't really get embarrassed when I'm out. I mean, I twitch a lot, as you can see. But I find when I'm out, I don't notice that. Thank God. I mean, now and again I see people watching me, looking at me, but the speech is the main problem. I'm hoping to get some help with that. I'm working at it. I'm trying to concentrate, and that does stress me.
Yeah, very understandable. And yeah, I actually have done a little bit of work around communication issues and speech therapy. And yes, speech therapy is reasonably effective in Parkinson's. It can be quite helpful. So I hope you managed to access that. And yeah, it's all that, like I say, it's that double whammy of if the anxiety kicks in, the symptoms go up, and that's such a pest. And if you can have techniques that help you manage that, plus the speech therapy techniques, then hopefully that will make your talking a bit better.
I find meditation helps.
Yes,
yes,
absolutely. And we got feedback because we asked a few questions about this sort of stuff. We were getting things about mindfulness and meditation and the non-standard ways of thinking about it. And that's why I'm kind of going, I don't want to just charge in with a pre-packaged cognitive behavioral therapy package. I want to really talk to people. I want to really understand what bits help, what aspects best, what bits are useful for what sorts of people. I mean, I'm an introvert, put me in group therapy and I'll shut down, you know, things like this, you know, it's all those sorts of very practical things, you know, about, you know, what works and what doesn't, and what can be simple and work. So we know, for example, that just being in a group and doing things like Tai Chi or dancing or singing can actually be incredibly positive for helping with mood, both the anxiety and the depression. So it's kind of, sometimes we over medicalize this. Sometimes it should be, go on, get out there and join a group. Actually, you know, be brave. They'll get used to you shaking and twitching and all the rest of it. Don't worry about that. But honestly, if you get a good group, then it can make a huge amount of difference. And it's trying to, like I say, do some of the stuff that we know has to be done at a therapeutic level, because it is got complex and it has got too impactful and it's too difficult to unpick for yourself. But also putting out information out there about, you know what, other people who are struggling the same way as you have got really good expertise and they found this works. So you might want to try it, you know, and then you look at the various options and go, yeah, Tai Chi, definitely not me. But a walking group, oh, I might do a walking group, you know, and it's working out what would work for you. Does that help?
Yes, thank you. I've got a gym set up in the yard.
I believe that so Julie's
just add something that might help. The phrase, worry not.
Yes.
Would Julie's partner like to come in now?
Yeah.
Andy, I'm Andy.
Hi, Andy.
Hi, Andy.
Yeah, one thing I noticed that you spoke about clinicians in your talk, which is good. But my experience with clinicians is they're interested in the motor functions, not the side effects. You know, it's someone else's problem. I've had DBS.
Yeah.
And as soon as you've had DBS, they pass it back to the neurologist to deal with, you know. So converting clinicians is difficult, in my opinion. Do you share that? Or?
Oh, you're speaking to the converted here, I'm afraid.
That's why they're called clinicians.
I give the clinicians a fair amount of grief because I go, listen to your people, will you? They're the experts. They really know what they're talking about. And as you say, don't just palm them off to the neurologists and things like this. Think about it creatively. Does this person need to see a physio? Does this person need to see a dietitian, etc.? You know, it's a complex disease. It needs a multidisciplinary team to have input to really help you out. And yes, trying to get clinicians to listen occasionally, that's something I'm working on.
Yes,
I don't know the solution entirely, but I do know the problem.
That's why they're called clinicians, of course.
Yes.
Yeah.
Lucy has had her hand up for ever such a long time.
Oh, hello. Thank you. Hello, Catherine. Nice, wonderful talk. Thank you. We did meet a couple of years ago at a research conference.
Indeed, I thought I recognised
Parkinson's conferences. Yeah. So my question actually is about, and you mentioned it just now, is mindfulness. Whether there be many studies on that, you think that would be useful. Of course, mindfulness is putting your state of mind in the moment and focusing on the body. And a couple of other things that we mentioned just now. Julie was talking about breathing techniques, and Jeff mentioned meditation, all their mindfulness. So actually at the University of Hertfordshire, we have just started doing some work on that, a student project. We want to sort of expand on that, but I really want to look at your measure of anxiety. I think that'd be really interesting and useful.
Exactly.
So can you tell us anything about mindfulness? And actually, a couple of people on the call might even have been in our student project survey last summer. So yes, do you think mindfulness is a way to go? Maybe
I absolutely do. And again, we've got mindfulness, we've got evidence for mindfulness for general anxiety, and we've got a few very, very small studies around mindfulness in Parkinson's. Like I say, if anxiety feels like anxiety, then actually any of the usual, what I call the general therapies, the general helping yourself therapies, might well be very useful. So things like mindfulness, meditation, breathing exercises, all of those I would look at and go, bluntly, there's very low risk of any side effects here, very low risk of any harms here, and you can stop it as soon as you don't like it. So go for it, have a try and see if it works for you. But always acknowledge it's not your fault if it doesn't work for you. We've all got unique brains, and some things work for some people better than other things. So go in, you know, with cautious optimism, I suppose. Don't expect it to, like I say, be the massive cure-all. But if it helps a bit, if it takes the edge off, if it helps you get out the door and go shopping, if it helps you enjoy the day a bit more, then bluntly, what the heck, let's go for it. You know, please do not start waiting on the evidence. It takes us ages to get proper reliable evidence. And really, all we're looking at is the more severe end, when it's really impacting on life and it's got so complex, it needs a professional to come in and help unpick and help you find a way back out of the maze. But this sort of stuff, which I would call well-being, looking after yourself holistically and really looking, going, look, I've got a big stressor in my life, this Parkinson's disease. It's a bit of a pain and it puts a pressure on lots of different aspects of my life. Right, let's optimize what I can, what the bits I have control over. So keeping on top of the pills, keeping on top of the diet, having a bit of exercise, going out with friends and having a glass of wine or two, very essential. And then, but also, yes, doing some relaxation techniques and breathing and all those sorts of things as well. So I think it is a case of really saying to you guys, actually, you have a huge amount of expertise and knowledge, and you know how to manage this really complex disease on a day-to-day basis really well for the most part. And then occasionally, if you can get just a little more expert input from the clinicians, that can just boost your skill set into the next level and you can cope with the next bit that's coming along. But that's what we're looking at, is hoping to come in, like I say, the more complex end of it, where it's really starting to get a pest. But absolutely, all of the sort of things that people say, oh, you should try this for anxiety. Bluntly, I mostly go, yeah, why not? Have a go at it. See if it works for you. See if it's the thing that helps you with your day. I know I've gone through any number of things, trying them out. I've tried acupuncture and Tai Chi and Alexander technique, like that one, massage and physio and all sorts. Some worked, some didn't. The only one that really worked for me was the Alexander technique, but I know it doesn't work for everybody. You know, it's all those sorts of things of going, what works for me? I'm a unique being, unique circumstances, unique brain. Let's find out what works for me. But acknowledging this is a complex thing, and you just incrementally add in little bits that help, and those add up. I hope that helps.
Thank you. Yes, there was a comment about some clinicians not taking notice. I think what they do take notice of is evidence, isn't it? So
that's basically
evidence takes a long time to collect. So that's why what you're doing is so important and getting it published, because that's actually what the clinicians.
That's it. If I can get it into the nice guidelines and things like that, then we really will have worked, will have achieved something.
Yeah.
And it is, as you say, it's trying to make sure that that's in a format that the clinicians feel confident that they can be recommending this. Like I say, I'm not a clinician, so I go ahead and go recommend most things anyway.
Right, I think.
And go, look, you're highly intelligent people. You can work out for yourselves if it's not working, and stop doing that. Go and do something else.
I think that Julie has her hand up. Is that right? Yes.
Yes, thank you. I use music to break the anxiety. I find that leaving the house on my own really difficult, because my Parkinson's has got to the stage where it switches off and off so quickly I get into a panic. And I just can't leave the house. Something's stopping me, and it just goes into a cycle. So I try and distract my brain. I mean, goodness, it doesn't always work, but I do put music on and try and distract myself.
Yeah.
So that's something that
And of course, there's an extra little bit you may not be aware of, is that music can be quite cueing for your walking. If it's got a good rhythm to it, then it can help the movement be a bit smoother, and so can help with the getting the heck out of that front door.
Yeah, it's breaking the cycle, isn't it? Because quite often, if you need to get out, then it's not time to sit down and do mindfulness. Do you know what I mean? Because you've got to take you. You know what I mean? It's something that you need. I need to instantly put my headphones on and break the cycle.
You see, these are all just such practical and sensible solutions, and this is what I want to tap into, and to be able to have a. First and foremost, these are the self-care things that anybody can do, and you don't need an expert to help you with. Or, you know, you can join in a meditation class or go to a mindfulness class or whatever. But it doesn't need to be NHS driven. You don't need to wait 6 months to see a consultant to get the reference and all the rest of it. You can actually do this straight away today. And if we can put together a package of information about that and say people are finding these things generally helpful, then we can move on to, and if you're a clinician, you're struggling, somebody's struggling a bit more, then this is also stuff that can be done. So that's what I really want to look at. Eliza has her hands up.
No, I just thought I'd outline some of my experience. That I'm 88 this year, and in December I went into the A&E, and I was 5 days in the A&U instead of the 2 days. And it was now when you're saying anxiety, I reckon that's what it was. I mean, the whole experience was that I was anxious because they wouldn't put the water near me to take my pills. Sometimes they left the urinal too far away. So all my movements were always anxious. I didn't know it was anxious. Nobody knew about Parkinson's, so there was no wheelchair there, no shower. So I sat most of the time all day staring at a wall. When somebody came to help me perhaps to try and go to the toilet, they would say, move your feet. Or they'd start talking to someone as they're with you. And you think, well, am I going to move or not? Then the ultimate thing was that I think I went to waiting for some pills. I took all my pills to be safe, which I managed mainly. But the last day in the Sunday, I think, I was lacking a pill. So I waited. So about midnight, I went with my usual pills to the bed and asked, would you mind putting me on my side? Because nobody would do that. And so I went to sleep. I came to about 3 in the morning, and I thought I'd been kidnapped. I'd been moved because they said they were busy. And I moved somewhere to a room that I wasn't know where I was, and I don't know what I said or done. There was 2 people there. I said, can you give me my 3 o'clock pill in the morning? No, you usually take your own pills. Well,
I was lying on my back. Can you give me a round? No, no, you usually do that yourself. Then they said, I said, well, can you put me on my side because I can't sleep on my back? Well, if you can't sleep, if you can't move on your side, we'll have to tell the doctor tomorrow you can't go home. So I never slept all that night, and I had a phone call, and I was so anxious. It's anxious now. I'm a very rational person, but it was bizarre because the woman who was attending me, when I kept calling them, she would come in and she would knock her leg against the door and say, I can't move you around because I've knocked my knee. It was bizarre. And then the next one would come and say there's a virus going on, but put your mask on straight away and disappear again. It would still do nothing for me. So I was so frantic that I phoned my son in the Midlands in the middle of the night. I phoned 111. I phoned 999 till my phone rang out. And I thought I was so isolated that I didn't know where to turn to. The most horrible experience I ever had in that hospital. And these two people that kept saying, well, I said, where's the man? He can tell me. No, he's off till 6 in the morning. We're full in the hospital, they're telling me. And I said, well, if you're full, how can you be away? So this bizarre thing went on all night. And in the end, I was so frantic that I thought, I'll never get out of this place. And I mean, this is not something I would come across normally. Yeah. So about 7 o'clock in the morning, I still didn't have a pill. And the biggest thing was that this couple of very nice young ladies from Thailand or something immediately gave me my pill, immediately turned me over, got rid of the bedding, dried me up, and it was solved. I did write a letter to Mandy Jackson, and she's very nicely returned and said, do I want to make a formal complaint? But with the NHS in the situation it is now, I said no. But she is passing it on to the AUC because it wasn't right. And you have to be very careful if you have Parkinson and going to hospital because, as she said herself, there's such a changeover and the problems with the NHS now, she can't actually train people on what symptoms of Parkinson's are. So you don't understand if you're in like A&U. I should have been in a ward. It was just dramatic. So I hope people don't take stock if they have to go into hospital, that they have to be careful of these things that just won't automatically happen.
Yeah, no, and may I first of all say, I really apologise that you had such a dreadful experience, and I completely understand that you're anxious about that, and that the experience made you more anxious. Perfectly reasonable and completely unacceptable standard of care. And part of what I do is I do train up my nurses and physios and things about Parkinson's disease, but they get one lecture about it, and that's it as an undergraduate. They might specialise in some postgraduate training and things like this and get some more information, but they'll literally get an hour from me and that'll be it about Parkinson's, because they're trying to learn so much else as well. And Parkinson's is regarded as such a small, relatively rare disease, but so much of what you're talking about isn't anything to do with Parkinson's. It's bleeding basic care. And I do also jump up and down with my nurses and everybody else about professional standards of behavior and how to listen to your patients and actually how to be respectful in your behavior to them and everything else. And I'm really sorry to hear that you were treated in such a bluntly dreadful manner, and I really do hope that some of that feedback does get through to the hospital, because
I think that people thought I was just making up that I
couldn't. No, not at all. Not at all. I mean, unfortunately, missed doses of medication is a really common thing, such that, you know, Parkinson's UK have a whole campaign about that they're trying to get through and things like this. It is really challenging to get the culture of care to be appropriate for people with complex needs. And that's what people with Parkinson's are, is you've got slightly more complex needs than your average patient. And for the system to not cope with that small amount of difference, it's scary.
One thing to add was quite nice, was that the physiotherapist lady talked to me for a while about the problems in the end.
Yeah.
And I said, well, there's nothing to do here for Parkinson's. Nothing. I can't move. I can't walk.
Exactly. A lot of this, it sounds like general care rather than Parkinson's.
She's a lovely girl. She went away and she came back with a box of crayons and some drawings from the children's department, which was a rather nice gesture, but that's a good offer.
Oh yeah, no, I mean, we've got some, you know, I absolutely adore the NHS. I think that as an institution, they're amazing. But equally, I do despair of them at times and go, oh, for goodness sakes, that's basic. You shouldn't be doing that. And I do try on both the counts of the specific knowledge about Parkinson's and things like this, but also try on the general stuff about, guys, wake up. This is a human being you're working with. Listen to them. Try and make differences there.
Right. I think we've come to an hour. It's 8 o'clock. Unless there's anything specific that somebody wants to say very quickly to Katherine. I mean, we're obviously going to say thank you. That goes without saying. And the number of questions that you've had shows how interested people are. And we will have you back. You will not escape. You will not escape.
Don't worry, I'll be back asking you to take part in more of my studies. And like I say, my depression and medication adherence study is up on the Parkinson's UK site. Apparently they'll be sending out an email about it about the 10th of next month. But you're welcome to join in soon.
Once we've got you, you can leave, but you can't check out.
Oh, good. That would be brilliant.
Yeah. Okay. So, is there one more question, maybe, perhaps? Very quick. Yeah.
7 words.
Well, actually, can I go back to David Jones because he hasn't spoken yet?
Hillary that wants to speak.
Yeah. Okay.
Hello. I had a very similar experience to Eric at Watford General at around the same time, late October, early November. My experiences were nowhere as bad as his, but they seemed not to understand what was going on. And they certainly wouldn't tell me. This was with the country locked down. I had no mobile phone with me when I was taken to A&E. So I couldn't contact my husband. He couldn't contact me. He didn't know where that was. And it was just so lowering. And I ended up in a so-called discharge ward where we were all not quite well enough to go home. And it was dreary and food was awful.
But you were panicking, weren't you?
And I was in a state of panic because I didn't know what was going on.
Nobody told you anything, did they?
No.
And you don't know what questions to ask.
Yeah. And like I say, again, I hugely apologise to you because I get so angry when I hear stories like this because I'm going, they're not necessary. It shouldn't happen like that. We can do better, even in times of COVID and pandemic and everything else. And that we are making people ill because our care is so poor really annoys me. It's kind of, what are we doing here? And I promise I am trying to do my best to try and shift the culture as much as the interventions, because my interventions can be as brilliant as you like. So I've got a fabulous intervention for helping you take your pills right. But if a therapist comes in the room and goes, don't know why we're bothering with this, taking pills, it's a bloody simple thing to do, innit? You must be stupid not to be able to do it. That my intervention goes straight out the window. It doesn't matter how brilliant it is because they've stuffed it up. Well, I unfortunately need to train my therapists that they can't say that and that they can't do this to people and they can't be leaving people in the dark. And bluntly, a mobile phone is not an infection risk. It can be wiped over with a wipe dead easy and you can hang on to it and all those sorts of things. I'm working on it, believe me, I really am. And I'm not alone. That's the good thing is there's other people out there going, we also are not happy with this. And I promise we will really be trying to make all the aspects of care so much better because I know, like I say, I'm there with you in the t-shirt. I've got a blimmin' embuggerance of a disease myself. I know how frustrating, how disempowering things can be. But I also know that if you're given the right tools, if you're given the right skills, if you're given the right support, oh boy, you guys can succeed in anything you want to do. And that's what I want to be able to provide you with, is the skills and the opportunities to get out there and do whatever it is that you want to do with your lives, to be as brilliant as I know you all can be, because I think you guys are completely brilliant. And I thank you so much for listening to me this evening. It has been an absolute delight to talk to you all.
And to hear from you has also been a delight. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Catherine. You want one very quick question?
Seven
Very
words.
quick. No?
Seven words. If worry worries you, worry not.
Worry not. Yes.
Worry not. Okay. Thank you so much, Catherine. This is going to be recorded. The lovely Simon will be putting it up on the website. Be in the link will be on our website. Yeah. So great. Thank you very much indeed. Absolutely crystal clear. Wonderful, wonderful talk.
Thank you very much, guys. I really appreciate being asked.
And
can I just thank everybody for having joined us from all over the place. Thank you very much indeed. And Catherine, it's already been said, I have little knowledge of Parkinson's. I find myself, I'm involved with it and become more and more interested as the times go by. And I just thank everybody. I again must leave this meeting now, and thank you all very much indeed.
Thank you very much,
guys. Thank you. Bye bye, everybody. Thank you very much. Thank you. Bye.